cartels are now going to be seen as foreign terror organizations, would you think about ordering U.S. Special Forces into Mexico to take them out?
Could happen. Stranger things have happened.
Now that Donald Trump is back in power, he's declared an all-out war on the cartels, one more ruthless than anything seen in history. Branding them as terrorist organizations, he stands on the brink of unleashing America's most lethal forces to crush them once and for all. For Mexico, 2024 has been a year of unprecedented bloodshed. The brutal civil war between Los Mayitos and Los Chapitos has turned the streets into battlefields, with death and disappearances mounting daily. Since early September, hundreds have been murdered in Sinaloa alone as rival factions fight for control of the Sinaloa Cartel. And now, with the US officially waging war on the cartels, the violence is about to escalate to an entirely new level. But amidst the chaos, one question remains. Will the cartels survive? The old order has crumbled, giving rise to a new generation, more ruthless and unpredictable than ever before. Will Trump succeed in wiping them out? Or is he ushering in an even deadlier era of cartels? With American soldiers already deploying to the border and military intervention looming, the stakes have never been higher. Let's dive into Trump's terrifying plans, the cartel wars ripping Mexico apart, and the chaos unfolding within the cartels themselves. Trump's fight against the cartels didn't just pop up out of nowhere. It's been brewing since his first term. It all started in late 2019 after a brutal massacre rocked the US-Mexico border. 3 women and 6 children, all part of the LeBaron family, were ambushed and gunned down while traveling through northern Mexico to a wedding. Their cars were riddled with bullets, with one even set on fire. It was pure horror.
Nita and 4 of my grandchildren are burnt. Shut up.
That was the heartbreaking reality left behind. The Mexican government scrambled for answers, with officials suggesting the family may have been collateral damage in a war between rival cartels. Trump, never one to hold back, unleashed his fury on Twitter, now X, calling out the savagery and offering Mexico a chilling proposition. This is the time for Mexico, with the help of the United States, to wage war on the cartels and wipe them off the face of the earth. We merely await a call from your great new president. Mexican president at the time, Andrés Manuel López Obrador, though, wasn't having it. He shut down the offer, insisting that Mexico could handle its own security without US intervention. He had just declared an end to Mexico's long and bloody war on drugs that had been raging for decades. That war officially started in 2006 when President Felipe Calderón sent thousands of soldiers into Michoacán to crack down on cartel violence. At first, it was 6,500 troops, but by 2008, that number had ballooned to 45,000. With police forces joining in, the government managed to take down some big cartel leaders, but instead of solving the problem, it only made things worse. Cities along the US-Mexico border, Juarez, Tijuana, Matamoros, became straight-up war zones. Even US Ambassador Carlos Pascual pointed out that Calderón's crackdown didn't fix anything. If anything, it fueled the fire. Once Calderón sent the military after the cartels, the death tolls skyrocketed. From late 2006 onward, over 15,000 people were killed in cartel-related violence. The numbers kept climbing. 5,000 murders in 2008, nearly 10,000 in 2009, and by 2010, the country saw over 15,000 homicides in a single year. By the time Calderón left office, official reports claimed 50,000 drug-related killings, but outside sources, they estimated the real number was more than 120,000, and the bloodshed didn't stop with Calderón. Mexico's next president faced more of the same: mass killings, kidnappings, cartel warfare. It just kept going. So when López Obrador took office, he wanted to try something different. Instead of continuing the war, he pushed for a peace strategy, offering amnesty to low-level drug traffickers and farmers caught up in cartel operations. His team insisted they weren't giving cartel bosses a free pass. The idea was to stop poor communities from getting sucked into the drug trade in the first place. According to López Obrador, the real issue wasn't just crime, it was Mexico's massive social inequality, which past governments had ignored. And here's the wild part. A recent study found that cartels are basically one of Mexico's biggest employers, with around 175,000 people on their payroll. That makes them the 5th largest workforce in the country. With 150 cartels operating, they're constantly bringing in new recruits, about 350 every week, to make up for losses from arrests, killings, gangs, and people trying to escape that life. But for all the danger that comes with working for a cartel, the paycheck isn't exactly worth it. One ex-member admitted he was only making around $500 a month, not much more than what others earned doing farm work. So, for many, joining a cartel isn't about getting rich, it's about survival. But not everyone is on board with Lopez Obrador's strategy. Critics slammed his approach as being way too soft, and despite his efforts, cartel violence only escalated. The cartels weren't just growing, they were getting smarter and deadlier. One of the most jaw-dropping displays of their power came on October 17, 2019, a day now known as Black Thursday, or the Battle of Culiacan, when Mexican forces tried to arrest Ovidio Guzman Lopez, son of El Chapo. The Sinaloa Cartel unleashed absolute chaos. Hundreds of heavily armed cartel fighters stormed the city, rolling in with armored vehicles, machine guns, and even rockets. They took hostages, including military families, forcing the government into an impossible position. The cartel made one thing clear: either they let Ovidio go, or innocent people were going to die. Outgunned and overwhelmed, the Mexican government backed down.
Police appeared to be outgunned by cartel forces as civilians ran for safety. Cartel members setting vehicles on fire to block roads, preventing security forces from maneuvering as men with heavy machine guns opened fire.
I don't think we've really seen anything like this on this scale in Mexico, maybe ever. Mexico's own security forces don't have the ability to defeat a cartel with, all the gun power that the Mexican military has, the Mexican police.
To stem the violence, Mexican security officials were forced to release Guzman.
Lopez Obrador stood by his decision to let Ovidio Guzman go, arguing that it saved lives and prevented an all-out bloodbath. He made it clear that capturing one drug lord wasn't worth the slaughter of innocent civilians. Yeah, they underestimated just how powerful the cartel's response would be, but he insisted that Ovidio was still facing legal consequences. Eventually, Ovidio was rearrested, shipped off to the US, and is now awaiting trial. But that whole Black Thursday incident was a wake-up call. It exposed just how ruthless, organized, and untouchable the cartels had become. After the brutal LeBaron family massacre, Trump was all set to designate the cartels as terrorist organizations. But at the request of Mexico's President Lopez Obrador, he hit pause on the plan. Obrador later publicly thanked Trump for backing off, saying, "We appreciate President Trump for respecting our decisions and choosing cooperation over conflict." Obrador's government was walking on eggshells, trying not to provoke the cartels and risk another bloodbath. For a while, that uneasy truce held. But in July 2024, everything fell apart fast. The US pulled off a major takedown, capturing Ismael El Mayo Zambada, the elusive kingpin of the Sinaloa Cartel, along with Joaquin Guzman Lopez, El Chapo's son. But the real shocker? This wasn't just a high-stakes operation. It was an inside job. Turns out, Joaquin had been secretly working with the DEA, cutting a deal for himself. He lured El Mayo onto a plane under false pretenses, only for them to land in El Paso, Texas, where DEA agents were waiting. And if you thought that was wild, it gets worse. El Mayo later claimed, through his lawyer, that Joaquin kidnapped him, tied him up, and personally handed him over to the feds.
The first is Ismael Zambada Garcia, or El Mayo, a co-founder of the cartel. He is facing charges for fentanyl trafficking, money laundering, firearms offenses, kidnapping, and conspiracy to commit murder. The second, Joaquin Guzman Lopez, is a son of its other co-founder, known as El Chapo, and is facing charges for trafficking in large quantities of cocaine, heroin, and meth, among other drugs.
With El Mayo behind bars, Mexico braced for war. Lopez Obrador, desperate to avoid another bloodbath, publicly begged the cartels to keep the peace, saying, "Those involved in these illegal activities know that fighting solves nothing. Why risk the lives of others? Why make families suffer?" But while he was hoping for peace, the military wasn't taking chances. That same weekend, they quietly deployed 200 elite paratroopers to Sinaloa, bracing for what everyone knew was coming. And sure enough, the cartel erupted into an all-out war. Two rival factions within the Sinaloa Cartel, La Masia, led by El Mayo's son, Israel Zambada Siqueiros, aka Mayito Flaco, and Los Chapitos, controlled by El Chapo's remaining sons, Ivan and Jesus Alfredo Guzman Salazar, went head-to-head in a brutal fight for power. Culiacan, the cartel's stronghold, became ground zero, but the violence spread like wildfire across the entire state of Sinaloa. Since September 2024, the death toll has been staggering. Hundreds have been killed or gone missing. The bodies are everywhere. Some are dumped on the streets, others left in abandoned cars, marked with a sombrero, La Masia's signature, or a pizza slice, Los Chapitos calling card, often with chilling threats attached. Then came the biggest shocker yet. Los Chapitos made a move no one saw coming. They teamed up with the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, CJNG. Yes, the same group they've been at war with for years. These two cartels have a bloody history, leaving behind a trail of massacres, beheadings, and all-out city shootouts. But in the cartel world, survival comes before loyalty, and this unexpected alliance proves just how far they're willing to go to hold on to power.
Townspeople in Culiacan are having to adjust to a new reality. One where bodies turn up on the street daily. One where schools are closed, businesses have reduced hours. And 2 weeks after the start of a civil war in the Sinaloa Cartel, sparked by the arrest in the United States of one of its founders, there's no end in sight.
Lopez Obrador pointed fingers at the U.S., blaming El Mayo's arrest for setting off this wave of destruction. If we are now facing instability and clashes in Sinaloa, it is because they, the American government, made that decision. He also made it clear, real cooperation between Mexico and the U.S. is impossible if Washington keeps making big moves without consulting Mexico first. But now, things are about to get even more complicated. With Trump officially designating Mexican cartels as terrorist organizations, the U.S.-Mexico relationship is on thin ice. This new label gives the U.S. the power to freeze cartel assets, impose travel bans, and prosecute anyone caught aiding them. And the most controversial part? It opens the door for U.S. military intervention. Since stepping back into office, Trump has ramped up border security like never before. Right now, 3,600 active duty troops are stationed along the southern border, with another 500 soldiers from the 10th Mountain Division who arrived on February 4th. It's looking less like a border and more like a war zone. Military-grade concertina wire is being stretched across key entry points, while troops handle transportation, intelligence, and tactical support for border patrol. And it's not just the ground that's being locked down. The skies are getting militarized too. On February 3rd and 4th, a U.S. Air Force RC-135 rivet joint was spotted flying over the Gulf of California, keeping tabs on cartel movements from international airspace. But this isn't some standard surveillance plane. It's a high-tech spy machine capable of intercepting cartel communications, mapping smuggling routes, and collecting critical intel. And according to Pentagon officials, this is just the beginning. More drones, spy planes, and even manned aircraft could soon be patrolling cartel-controlled zones. The Army's MQ-1s and the Air Force's MQ-9 Reapers, the same drones used for counter-terrorism strikes, are already on standby.
The Defense Department has been helping on the border for decades, just not at the level that President Trump has charged us with right now. Because we believe, and he believes, that border security is national security.
And Mexico's new president, Claudia Sheinbaum, is also stepping up. After a deal with Trump to put a pause on tariffs, she sent thousands of troops to the U.S. border to help crack down on trafficking and illegal migration, with 10,000 additional National Guard members reinforcing Mexico's northern border. But Trump's crackdown on the cartels isn't stopping at surveillance and border reinforcements. He's still pushing hard for the penalty for traffickers, saying it's the only real way to scare off cartel leaders and major dealers.
So you can kill thousands of people and go to jail for 30 days. They catch a drug dealer, they don't even put him in jail. Think of it. You kill one person, you get the death penalty in many states. Or you get life imprisonment. Think of it. You kill 5,000 people with drugs because you're smuggling them in and you're making a lot of money and people are dying and they don't even put you in jail, they don't do anything. But you might get 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, you might get a year, but you're not gonna get, and then you wonder why we have a problem. That's why we have a problem, folks.
Trump has even pointed to China and Singapore as examples, arguing that their automatic executions for crimes prove that harsh punishments work.
You'll never really solve the problem unless you do what other countries do, and that's the death penalty for dealers.
But not everyone agrees. Public health experts and human rights groups argue that executing drug dealers won't fix anything. It doesn't address addiction, could wrongfully convict innocent people, and would hit marginalized communities the hardest. Still, Trump isn't budging. He sees the death penalty as a necessary weapon in the fight against drugs, framing it as a bold move to protect American lives. And that's not the only controversial policy he's bringing back. Trump is reviving the Remain in Mexico policy, officially known as the Migrant Protection Protocols, MPP. This means that asylum seekers at the southern border won't be allowed into the U.S. while waiting for their immigration court hearings. Instead, they'll have to stay in Mexico during the process. The goal? To stop migrants from disappearing into the U.S. before their court dates and cut down on fraudulent asylum claims. Trump's team argues that too many migrants enter the U.S., claim asylum, and never show up for their hearings. By keeping them in Mexico, they hope to discourage illegal crossings and limit cartel involvement in human smuggling. And let's be real, the cartels have long profited off trafficking people across the border, charging migrants thousands of dollars for the journey. But when Remain in Mexico was first introduced in 2019, it didn't just slow illegal crossings, it created a whole new business opportunity for the cartels. With fewer migrants able to cross, the cartels jacked up their smuggling prices. Desperate asylum seekers, terrified of being stuck in cartel-controlled border cities, paid top dollar to be snuck in through riskier routes. And that extra cash, straight into cartel pockets. They even bribed officials to smooth out the process. And the violence, it got worse. Rival cartels started warring over migrant shelters and key smuggling routes. Border cities turned into battlegrounds, and Mexican law enforcement couldn't keep up. In some cases, officers were even accused of working with the cartels, exploiting migrants instead of protecting them. With nowhere safe to go, some migrants had no choice but to work for the cartels just to survive. In exchange for food, shelter, and protection, they were forced into illegal work, whether that meant running acting as enforcers, or becoming cartel informants. Then came Biden. When he took office in 2021, he shut down Remain in Mexico, allowing asylum seekers to wait for their U.S. court hearings inside the country. But the policy's end was short-lived. Texas and Missouri sued Biden's administration, arguing that he ended it improperly. A Texas judge ordered it reinstated, and even after Biden's team fought back in the Supreme Court, the ruling stood. Reluctantly, the Biden administration restarted MPP, promising to make it more humane. But now that Trump's back in the White House, Remain in Mexico is back on, and it's rolling out immediately.
All illegal entry will immediately be halted, and we will begin the process of returning millions and millions of criminal aliens back to the places from which they came.
But cartels aren't taking this lying down. They're already striking back hard.
That cartel operatives have actually been given permission to shoot at U.S. Border Patrol agents.
After Trump signed his executive order, the cartel response was immediate and brutal. Reports are flooding in that cartel leaders have ordered direct attacks on U.S. Border Patrol agents, deploying kamikaze drones and homemade explosives in a desperate attempt to fight back against the crackdown.
The cartels authorized the use of weaponized drones, explosives against CBP personnel and U.S. law enforcement down there at the southern border. Now, they're actually being encouraged, of course, to remain cognizant and vigilant, but they're also being encouraged to use their long arms, Blake. I have never seen this in a CBP memo before.
Border agents have been put on high alert. They've been ordered to keep their weapons ready, wear bulletproof vests at all times, and report any drone activity the second they spot it. Intelligence teams in El Paso are scrambling, trying to stay ahead of the growing threat. As if that's not already horrifying enough, cartel shootouts have become a routine. On January 28th, cartel gunmen opened fire on Border Patrol agents near Fronton, Texas. They didn't just attack, they used migrants as human shields. Others took up positions on a small island between the U.S. and Mexico, creating the perfect sniper nest for an ambush. And it's only getting worse. Near Brownsville, cartel enforcers are now rigging roads with explosives. Smuggling and bribery were just the start. Now, they're treating this like a full-blown war. Meanwhile, in Washington, Senator Mike Lee is calling for drastic action. He wants private security firms and trained civilians brought in to reinforce the border, stepping in where law enforcement is overwhelmed. He's also pushing for an all-out offensive against cartel power, seizing their boats, vehicles, cash, gold, anything that fuels their reign of terror. The battle lines are drawn. The cartel war is no longer just Mexico's problem. The violence is spilling over, and the bloodshed is just beginning. But what do you think? Will Trump's hardline approach actually take down the cartels, or will they just adapt and come back even stronger? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to check out the others. Also, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that bell so you never miss an update.